2D fighting games are my guilty pleasure. It's what I turn to when I'm bored or want to kill some time. And after the Sega Saturn, the PS2 had the best ones, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the Street Fighter Anniversary Collection, and the King of Fighters series. 3D fighters are a different story, however. They're not as easy to get into in my opinion, because they generally have intricate move sets that take a long time to master. So they're not for casual players like myself. The good news is, if you are into 3D fighting games, there's a wide selection to pick from on PCSX2. After testing at least 30 games in a row, I couldn't find one that didn't work. Basically, they're all compatible with the emulator. So let's begin with the list.
Ready? Fight!
Dragon Ball Z games have always been popular, but Tenkaichi 2 took all the best parts from the show and made something unforgettable. I'll admit the fighting is challenging since you're not just moving in 3 dimensions, but can fly as well. Still, if you're a fan of the show, this should be a great experience.
That's how we do it!
Electronic Arts used to be known for being at the cutting edge of innovation, but Def Jam, Fight for New York would never be made today, given the company's obsession with massive blockbusters and microtransactions. The game features the likenesses of many rappers and other celebrities. What makes it superior to the first game is that you can now choose fighting styles, and you can use the environment to inflict more harm on your opponent. War of the Monsters is probably the most underrated game on this list. At the very least, it's unique and fun. For me, the best part is that you have complete freedom to move around and cause havoc in the city environment, and the destructibility of buildings is great. It's kinda like a 3D version of the old Rampage games.
A big Southern California welcome to all our Smackdown fans. I'm Michael Cole, here with Taz at ringside.
Wrestling games are probably the hardest to get into because of the extreme number of moves to learn. And I played at least 6 of them for the purposes of this video. Smackdown vs. Raw 2007 was the only one where I could actually make progress. I found the others overly complex and unforgiving, so it's the automatic winner when it comes to wrestling games. Despite being a noob, I can see why these are so popular among fans.
Let's begin.
In my opinion, the series peaked on the PS3 with Virtua Fighter 5, but number 4 isn't bad either. In Japan, it was one of the first arcade games to allow for online play. Incidentally, the PS2 version's texture details were reduced for performance reasons, but it's still one of the best-looking fighting games on the console. As for gameplay, it had a greater emphasis on timing when compared to Virtua Fighter 3, and several mechanics were either enhanced or streamlined to make the experience more engaging.
Ready?
Get ready! Fight!
Bloody Roar games are easy to pick up but hard to master. It's been a staple on PlayStation since the original console, and the third game carried over all the attributes that made the first 2 so great, but it has decent graphics as well. I would say the strength of Bloody Roar is its simplicity and AI. I like the transformations that fighters can use to power up and quickly dominate their opponents, so it does bring something unique.
To his midsection and does big-time damage. Sugar Ray Robinson.
As a sport, boxing is about the art of positioning. And Fight Night captures this essence perfectly. You can't simply run back or sideways, it's about bobbing and weaving while looking for a weakness in your opponent's defense. What I like about Round 3 when compared to its prequels is that there's no heads-up display telling you how tired or injured an opponent is. You have to judge by looking at their movements and facial features. It's about as real as a boxing simulator gets, in my opinion.
Here I come. Sorry, I'm not sweet. Get ready.
The DOA series has always been criticized for being glorified button mashers. There's not much subtlety in how you're supposed to play, but that's the whole appeal. You can switch off your brain and just have fun. In many ways, it's like a fast-paced 2D fighting game with deadly counters and awesome combos. And it's easy on the eyes, so what's not to like? Mortal Kombat Deception is a sequel to Deadly Alliance. Its Conquest mode differs from the Conquest mode of Deadly Alliance, containing elements of open-world exploration in between story progression. It's trying to be different, and I kinda like it for this reason. I have to admit, X-Men Next Dimension wouldn't be many people's pick as one of the better fighting games on the PS2, but I chose it mostly out of sentimental reasons. It was one of the first games I played on the console, so it stuck with me over the years. Having said that, it's not a bad experience, especially if you're a fan of Marvel Comics like myself. I love the special moves, and there's just enough challenge to keep you invested.
Round 1.
Tekken 4 was the first in the series to introduce walled stages. It also had environmental hazards that could come into play during fights. And the lighting, textures, and physics all benefited from a new graphics engine that could take full advantage of the PS2 hardware. The roster had increased as well, with a total of 6 new playable fighters. Story-wise, things were far darker and maturer than Tekken 3, which helped to make Tekken 4 one of the most awarded games in 2002.
Round 1. Fight!
Chronologically, Armageddon is the final chapter of the original Mortal Kombat storyline. Unsurprisingly, it features just about every fighter from the previous games. Unique to Armageddon at the time was the ability to create a custom character and finishing moves. It retains all the improvements from Deception and has its own unique mini-games. Just the sheer amount of content alone makes this the best Mortal Kombat game of the 6th generation. For Tekken 5, Namco removed some of the changes made in the previous game, like uneven stage terrain and slower gameplay. This was to make it similar to the older games in the series. Tekken 5 also allowed players to customize their fighter for the first time, allowing them to change the colors of their outfits and buy additional costumes. On top of that, there were mini-games as well. All of these improvements definitely paid off, because the game sold over 8 million copies worldwide, which is huge for a fighting game.
Through with words.
Battle 1. Fight!
The biggest question regarding Soulcalibur II was which version to buy, because the GameCube, Xbox, and PS2 all had their own special character included in the roster. On GameCube it was Link, on the Xbox it was Spawn, and on PS2 it was Kratos. Regardless whichever version you chose, you got a quality game for your money. There were many changes to the gameplay from the first game, but not limited to the inclusion of a clash system and alternate weapons for each character. Finally, we come to the very best 3D fighting game on the PS2, and it really has to be Soulcalibur III. If number 2 was great, this game pretty much blew everything else out of the water in terms of graphics, animations, gameplay, and replayability. It had an interactive story mode and a turn-based RPG mode, which was practically a game on its own. Plus, it still has the biggest roster of any Soulcalibur game to date. It's astounding how good it was, and still is even today. The only way to play it is on an arcade machine, a real PS2, or here on PCSX2.